Lane Kiffin adds another A-list assistant. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. Lane Kiffin has added T. Martin to his staff at LSU. Now, in a minute, I'm going to get to what this means on the field, how T. Martin fits in, his trajectory, all that stuff. We're also going to get you an update on Will Wade a bit later in the show. But the single biggest takeaway from the news, and hat tip Jordan Schultz, who was the first to report the T. Martin to LSU news. The single biggest takeaway is how much this underscores LSU's commitment to Lane Kiffin, because he is getting everything and anything he wants that will help him win, and nobody is telling him no. Let me just sort of illustrate this for a second. So T. Martin in his career has been an offensive coordinator. He has been a receivers coach. He has worked with quarterbacks. He's coached quarterbacks as well. He's done a ton on the offensive side of the ball. If you look at LSU's coaching staff, for example, George McDonald is the passing game coordinator and the wide receivers coach. Charlie Weiss is the offensive coordinator, works with quarterbacks. Lane Kiffin also works with the quarterbacks, and Dane Stevens was hired to work with quarterbacks. That's 3 quarterback coaches. I mentioned George McDonald working with receivers. Well, Sawyer Jordan works with the inside receivers. Oh, did I also mention that while Lane Kiffin works with the offense and Charlie Weiss is the OC, Joe Cox is also the co-OC, who also works with tight ends. Oh, by the way, all of those position coaches all have analysts on staff working with those positions as well. So when you look at, for example, the wide receiver room, Antonio Parks is the wide receivers analyst. I mentioned Joe Cox also works with the tight ends. Well, Ty Hatcher is the tight ends analyst. And it even extends beyond just the on-field coaches. Look at what LSU and Lane Kiffin did in building this staff. For example, we know that Billy Glasscock is the general manager. Well, J.R. Belton was a guy that was on staff and who was ascending rapidly, a guy who played football at West Monroe and collegiately at Louisiana Tech and had been elevating through the LSU staff. Well, they didn't want to get rid of J.R. Belton because he was valuable, so they made J.R. Belton the assistant general manager for external operations. That's different than Adam Clark, who's the assistant general manager for internal operations, whatever that means. And then, of course, Lane Kiffin brought Thaddeus Rivers with him to be the senior executive director of operations. And that differs from Tyler Vines, who is the assistant director of operations. And then there's player personnel. You see, Mike Williams was brought in to be the senior executive director of player personnel, but Jeff Martin has been such an integral part to LSU football ever since Nick Saban was at LSU. So while Mike Williams is the senior executive director of player personnel, Jeff Martin is the director of player personnel, differing from Austin Shelton, who is also the director of player personnel, but not to be confused with Carl St. Cyr, who is the assistant director of player personnel. And then Sam Petito, who we know is from Tangipahoa, who was a great assistant and lieutenant for Nick Saban for years in Tuscaloosa, and then wasn't retained by Kalen DeBose, took a job at Ohio State, won the national championship. Then Brian Kelly brought Sam Petito to LSU. And while I mentioned that Mike Williams is the senior executive director of player personnel and Jeff Martin is the director of player personnel, and so too is Austin Shelton, the director of player personnel, and Carl St. Cyr is the assistant director of player personnel. Sam Petito is the assistant director of player personnel for college scouting. I think by now you probably get the point that I'm getting at, which is all of these people bring value. I think that's undeniable. And some of them are people that have been with Lane at multiple stops that he trusts implicitly and wanted to bring with him to LSU. And so, too, is it true that there's a lot of people that were on this staff that provide immense value to LSU football. One of the big mistakes Brian Kelly made when he was hired is he completely cleaned house. Now, there was a lot of rot in the foundation of LSU football at the time. And I don't need to unearth and relitigate all of it. Many of us know what that is. So Brian Kelly felt like he had to come in here and just dig out the root of that infection and get it out and start over. But in so doing, he threw the baby out with the bathwater in some respects. Like not retaining Corey Raymond was silly. Letting Jeff Martin leave for Southern Cal was silly. There were people on staff that it would have greatly behooved him to retain, both on field and in the front office. Lane Kiffin has retained a ton of people in the support staff roles and also brought in his own guys. And even when they've had shared roles, they've found a way to make it work title-wise and clearly financially. To put some definition behind this, last year in 2025, LSU had 61 staffers working on football. Now, that's from Brian Kelly to the on-field assistants to the analysts to the player personnel people and all the way on down, okay? 61. The support staff budget was about $5 million. The assistant coach budget was about $10.82, and the entire coaching staff, when you include Brian Kelly, was $21.6 million. So the entire coaching staff was $21.6. The support staff was an additional $5 million, and they had 61 staffers. If you go look at LSUsports.net right now and go count the number of people, if you go into the staff directory and scroll to football, all the people working in football, there are 75, as of this moment, 75 people listed. And that is before we mention T. Martin and also Heath Dito, who we broke the news at LouisianaSports.net that was added from Auburn on Tuesday. So Heath Dito had added Tuesday, and then we learned T. Martin is added on Wednesday. So that puts you up to at least 77, whereas a year ago it was 61. And that's before we even talk about the raises that all these coaches got and the assistants and the titles and everything. All that to say, T. Martin is just another example of how LSU is so all in to give Lane Kiffin whatever he needs to be successful. Now, I don't know who's writing all those checks. I know it ain't me, but I know the people writing those checks, like the people in the athletic administration at LSU and the university administration at LSU, all want the same thing. They want LSU football to win. It's a non-negotiable. You got to win at football because it funds everything else. So if Lane Kiffin, and you have this massive investment in Kiffin financially, and the massive investment, $54 million you put into buying out Brian Kelly, you're not going to make that type of investment and then half step with Kiffin and go bargain shopping on roster and support staff. You're going to give him whatever he needs, because if he wins, if it hits, if you win a championship, you will get a return on that investment tenfold. But the onus now is on Lane Kiffin to make sure he pays off that investment. T. Martin is a big part of this, and I want to talk about what T. Martin might mean for LSU on the field as we continue. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. Welcome to the 5-hour energy flavor draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like Confetti Craze, Fruity Rainbow, or Cotton Candy. There's something for everyone. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and I've got my number one pick for the 5-hour energy flavor draft. While mine is always extra strength grape, maybe you might want to give strawberry banana a whirl. It's a tropical delight with strawberry, a taste that goes in everything from smoothies and milkshakes to cakes and ice cream. It's sweet strawberry flavor up front, soft, mellow banana finish, smooth, creamy fruit profile. It's reminiscent of a fruit smoothie. Very low acidity, easy to drink, gentle, sweet aftertaste. It's strawberry banana, and you can find your favorite flavor of 5-hour energy, which gives you that boost with zero sugar. 5 Hour Energy has a lot of upcoming flavor innovations planned that we can't wait to tell you about right here. But in the meantime, find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots. Available online at 5hourenergy.com or at Amazon. We'll continue talking about T. Martin here in just a quick second. But I do want to remind you to join the Everydayer Club right now with the code MARCH to get your first month free. If you sign up before the NCAA tournament tips off Thursday, you can compete against me and our men's and women's bracket pools on Discord. The winner in each will get $100 in Locked On merch. The rest of us can commiserate in the members-only chats as our brackets blow up. And as a member of the club, you get an ad-free version of Locked On LSU. Again, it's all free for 1 month with the code MARCH. The link is in the show notes. So as we mentioned here, LSU has added T. Martin, and it's wild because, look, I'm 43 years old, and in 1998, T. Martin was the quarterback of the Tennessee Volunteers when they won the first ever BCS national championship. I remember the game well when they beat Florida State. 1998 then led to a short NFL career for T. Martin, and he began his coaching career at Morehouse in 2006. Y'all, it has been 20 years that T. Martin has been in coaching. And that's to illustrate this isn't just some guy that's an up-and-comer that Lane Kiffin has added. T. Martin has spent the last 20 years in coaching, and the last 5 of which have been in Baltimore with the Ravens. 3 of those were as the quarterbacks coach working with MVP Lamar Jackson. Now, John Harbaugh was fired in Baltimore. He was replaced by Jesse Minter, and they made the decision, Minter did, not to retain T. Martin. So T. Martin was in a little bit of limbo there if he was going to be retained or not. Ultimately was not. Coaching free agent, looking for a landing spot, and Lane Kiffin hires him in Baton Rouge. Now, T. Martin and Lane Kiffin have some history together. In 2012, when Kiffin was the head coach at Southern Cal, Kiffin hired T. Martin. Now, Kiffin coached USC in 2012. They were preseason number 1 that year and finished 7-6. And then in 2013 is the year when Kiffin was fired on the tarmac. But despite the fact that Kiffin hired T. Martin and then Kiffin was fired, Clay Helton, who then replaced Kiffin permanently after Ed Ogeron was the interim, Clay Helton retained T. Martin. T. Martin stayed for 7 seasons at Southern Cal from 2012 through the 2018 season. Then he returned to his alma mater, Tennessee, in 2019. When I look at T. Martin, I think there are so many incredible benefits and advantages and so much value in adding T. Martin to the staff. So number one, he is known as an incredible recruiter. Back in 2016, 24/7 Sports named T. Martin the National Recruiter of the Year. So I understand that in this day and age of college football, relational recruiting has never meant less, especially with elite level players that are out to get the best NIL rev share deal they can get. But in some instances, you look for tiebreakers, right? If the money's comparable, what's going to be the thing that maybe tips the scale with a certain player to a certain school? And it can be that relationship. That can be something, if all else is equal, that will let you win one of those recruiting battles. So the fact that T. Martin is an elite recruiter only helps. I also love that he's been everywhere. T. Martin's from Mobile, which is a recruiting hotbed in the Gulf South. And it's 3 hours from Baton Rouge, so very drivable. LSU has recruited Mobile very well over the years. Jamarcus Russell came out of Mobile. More recently, Neil Farrell came out of Mobile. So LSU's recruited Mobile well, and now T. Martin is from there, who's on your staff. He played at Tennessee, and then when he began his coaching career, he was at Morehouse and then was a high school coach in Atlanta. Of course, LSU has always recruited the Atlanta area very well. So T. Martin's from Mobile. He's coached high school ball in Atlanta, so he's cultivated a lot of relationships there. Collegiately, he's coached at Kentucky. He's coached at Tennessee, so he has SEC experience as a coach. He's coached at New Mexico, so he's even been in the lower classifications. Maybe that could help in transfer portal relationships and evaluations. He's been at Southern Cal. He's been on staff with Lane Kiffin, so Kiffin knows him. Martin knows what to expect from Lane Kiffin as well. Has West Coast ties. All that to say, he's been in the NFL where everybody LSU recruits and develops wants to go. He's worked with receivers and quarterbacks and called plays. What an asset. I mean, this guy who's been a coach for 20 years, has been major college, NFL, offensive coordinator, play caller, receivers, quarterbacks. He's done pretty much everything. What an asset to be able to add. Now, I don't know, and I'll be very curious to see how this evolves. I don't know what T. Martin's specialty is going to be. Like, as we illustrated just a bit ago, you have Lane Kiffin, who ultimately it's his offense, right? And you've got Charlie Weiss Jr. and Joe Cox as co-OCs. And Weiss is working with quarterbacks, and Cox is working with tight ends. Lane Kiffin also works with the quarterbacks. And you also have Dane Stevens on staff, who also works with quarterbacks. And then if you look at receivers, George McDonald's the passing game coordinator who works with the receivers. And then Sawyer Jordan is the inside wide receivers coach. And as we mentioned a bit ago, you also, with Antonio Parks, you also have an analyst working with receivers. All that to say, I don't know what T. Martin's going to do. And what's kind of crazy when you look at just the sheer numbers, I rattled it off. You get 75 listed right now, and then you add, the two who we just discussed with T. Martin and Heath Dadu. You're talking about 77 staffers. You're going to have as many staff members as you are football players, which is wild. It's like a one-to-one training and coaching. So I don't know where T. Martin's going to fit in with on-field coaching. Remember, they changed the rule to where analysts can work on the field and coach on the field. It used to be that analysts by title could only sort of coach the coaches and be in film study and help game plan. Well, they've changed that. So analysts can go coach on the field. So it'll be interesting to see what position group specifically T. Martin kind of takes to whenever LSU begins spring practice on Tuesday. But what a coup to have another experienced voice who played quarterback, has coached major college, who's coached in the NFL, can help recruit, has investment in relationships from Atlanta to LA and points in between. Major coup here for LSU getting T. Martin on staff. We'll see how that role is defined as LSU hits the practice field on Tuesday for the start of spring practice. Now, we're also keeping an eye on the future of the LSU men's basketball program. We told you that on Tuesday in the first four, NC State lost their game to Texas 68-66. So Will Wade's season came to a disappointing end in the first four. Well, what are they saying in Raleigh about Wade and the possibility of him rejoining LSU? You'll hear that from an NC State insider as we wrap up next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in, meeting a real person, and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. So head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and to book your appointment. That's turbotax.com/local. The biggest stretch of college basketball season is here. Buzzer beaters, bracket busters, and those unforgettable moments that everyone's talking about the next day. Being there live for something like that, well, that's bucket list stuff. The hard part is always actually getting tickets. Long queues, prices jumping around, surprise fees at checkout. The GameTime app gives fans the advantage with constant innovation. It's how you unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. It's incredibly simple to use. The GameTime guarantee means 100% legitimate tickets delivered on time at the best price. And the best part, fees are included in the price you see. So what you see is what you pay, period. I love zone deals as well. It lets you pick the section, and then you save even more while GameTime selects the seats. There's no stress, no guesswork, just a smooth experience from start to finish. That's exactly what you want during the busiest part of the season. Take the guesswork out of buying college basketball tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. The LSU men's basketball season has been over for more than a week, and still nary a word about the future of Matt McMahon. And that's because we've all been waiting for the end of the NC State basketball season to see if LSU would, in fact, be able to make a run at bringing Will Wade back. Now, if you're an everydayer, we've talked about this a ton. The very, very, very abbreviated Cliffs Notes are that several power brokers around Louisiana and LSU want Will Wade back. Governor Jeff Landry, Chairman of the board Lee Mallett, President Dr. Wade Roos, who came over from McNeese, and they're not alone. You also have factions like some very prominent LSU boosters, very likely LSU Athletic Director Verge Osbury, who are not keen on paying Matt McMahon an $11 million buyout for he and his staff to not coach anymore, adding more dead money onto the budget. So it's a little bit of a power struggle right now. We know what the perspective is and has been in Baton Rouge, but I decided let's talk to someone who covers NC State every day to get that perspective. Noah Fleischman from the Wolfpacker, that's an On3 outlet, joined my radio show, and I asked Noah about the noise about Will Wade potentially returning to LSU. While it's loud here, I asked him what it's like in Raleigh.
It really wasn't a thing until it became a thing in LSU. And even then, it's really not been a thing in Raleigh. I mean, there's been not really much traction to it. He's basically said, all the things that you would expect him to say. But he's been adamant about, not really wanting to go there. And, I mean, it started with this radio show comment he made, I think, a month or two ago. It really is before the LSU stuff came out. But when you look at it now, it's even more interesting, where he was talking about, he got fired at LSU, takes a year off, and then he goes, it's not too often that 3 years later you're in a better job. So that's a quote that I keep referring back to when people ask me about LSU, is he looks at NC State right now as a better job than LSU.
I don't disagree, by the way, about NC State being a better job. They care about basketball at NC State. They prioritize it. Will had a lot of frustrations when he was here the first time. He talked about the leaking roof at the practice gym. LSU still hasn't been able to push forward the new arena. We're sitting here debating paying buyouts and if it's worth investing in basketball. Like, NC State is objectively a better job in the hierarchy. But is it the best job for Will Wade? That's sort of the question. And a lot of that depends on who's calling the shots and who's in charge. Now, I also asked about NC State's commitment to Will Wade. Listen, 6 weeks ago, I get it. When they had won 6 in a row in conference, everyone was gung-ho Will Wade. Well, you lose 8 of your last 10, stumble into the first 4, and then lose to Texas. Are they as eager to keep Will Wade? Here was the answer.
Oh, they'll do everything in their power to keep him. He was obviously one of their top targets a year ago after firing Kevin Keats, who was 1 year removed from making the Final Four. You don't make that move unless you know you're going to get your guy, and they went after Will and got him from McNeese. So I think this is an opportunity, whether if LSU's job does open and the Tigers can call, I think NC State will do everything in its power. And they gave him everything he wanted in year 1, and it seems like he's going to get everything he wants in year 2. So it's going to take a lot, I think, from LSU to pry him from Raleigh, more than just, paying him the money and the salary. I don't think he really looks at that as the make or break. It's more of, what can you give him to go to roster? NC State has given him everything he's asked for in the first year.
What has he asked for?
Yeah, he just wants resources to build a roster. When you look at the roster he had this year, they mismanaged what they spent it on, but they gave him, north of $10 million to use. So when you look at it that way, he's mentioned he's having everything he needs to win. It's on him. They obviously did not build a roster that was conducive to winning, and they're looking to fix that going into next season.
And finally, I asked Noah Fleischman, if Will Wade does leave Raleigh to come back to Baton Rouge, how would you rate his level of surprise?
I would be pretty shocked, just based on what he said about, the job there, what he said about being at NC State, but also if you look at his, path in college basketball, he's been everywhere at least 2 seasons. He was at Chattanooga for 2 years, at VCU, my alma mater for 2 years, before going to LSU, to McNeese for 2 years, now at NC State. So when you look at what he does, he at least stays somewhere for 2 seasons everywhere he's been. And I'd expect that at least from NC State. But at the same time, I would expect him to be at NC State for 5 to 7 years. This is the place that he wants to build. He's mentioned that. I think a big part is his family. His wife and daughter really love living in Raleigh. His wife's from Charlotte. It's a 2.5-hour drive back to see her family. So it's kind of more than just the job. I think the family plays a big role in this, and everything on that side, they really love living in Raleigh.
One thing's for certain, somebody is going to be really disappointed. Either the folks at LSU that are working behind the scenes to get Will Wade to return, or the people in Raleigh who having a little bit of an ostrich effect, burying their head in the sand, pretending like Will Wade isn't at least entertaining the idea of returning to Baton Rouge. As this plays out, we'll certainly talk about it right here. So do me a favor. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review if you're on YouTube. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And be sure to let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day.